Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. The drive home. I go to dental school in Minnesota and was driving home to Chicago to see my parents after a long and hard week of final exams. I left my apartment in Minneapolis around 8 p.m. and figured I'd be home around 3 a.m. In retrospect, when I think about it, I probably should have gotten a good night's sleep before driving, but I figured, what the heck. I'm already wired on enough coffee, so I should be able to make it home without falling asleep. Lo and behold, within 2 hours of being on the road, my eyelids were closing, so I pulled into a rest stop in Wisconsin just off I-90. I kept the engine running, turned up the air conditioning, locked my doors, and rested my head on the headrest. I figured all I need is a good 30-minute power nap and I'll be all set to hit the road again. So, I'm asleep and I hear something weird coming from the back of the car. At first, I thought I was dreaming, so I ignored it. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Now it sounds like a mechanical noise, kind of like a clunking sound. So I'm thinking to myself, I just had this car checked by my mechanic from top to bottom, so what the heck is that noise? I look in my rearview mirror and I swear I see some weird whitish bluish looking outline. To describe it better, it looks like a chalk outline you might see at a murder investigation site. However, and this is this kicker, it's standing up. My heart skipped a couple of beats while I was looking at this thing. So I closed my eyes and I told myself, I'm imagining all this and that my exhaustion is simply playing tricks on me. I opened my eyes and voila, it's gone. Phew. Anyway, got out of my car, walked around to the back and looked around and underneath the car. I was thinking, it's probably some mechanical issue that I'll have checked in Chicago. No big deal. So I got back in the car and hit the road. A few miles later, the sound started up again. Same old clunking metallic-like sound. Now I'm getting a bit annoyed since the sound is getting louder and more constant. I looked in my rearview mirror, nothing. A couple of seconds later, I look again and guess what? The illuminated outline is there again. Only this time, rather than a simple outline, it looks like it has a face. I can't really describe if it was a man or a woman. All I can say is that it was basically staring at me and the man-woman looked young. It also seemed like blue light was piercing through the skin of his or her face. Okay, now I'm freaking out. I'm generally a pretty brave individual, and at this point I'm getting a really weird tingling sensation traveling down my neck. Every second or so I look in the mirror and this man-woman thing is staring back at me. It doesn't disappear like the first time. Okay, I know what you're thinking. There's someone hiding in my backseat, playing a joke on me, right? Wrong. Guess what, my friends? My car is a little sports car with only 2 seats. So whatever's staring back at me is outside somewhere. Oh, and by the way, the clunking noise is getting louder. It sounded like someone is banging a hammer on the trunk. You may also be thinking that maybe someone on a motorcycle is just following me close behind. But trust me, that wasn't the case. Anyway, by now the noise stopped again and the image of that figure disappeared. I pulled off the interstate to a gas station to fill up. I walked around to the back of the car and looked around again. Nothing. But when I touched the trunk, it felt ice cold, as if the car was in an ice storm. The funny part is that this incident happened in June and the weather was around 75 degrees that night. At this point, my knees are shaking and the hair on my arms was standing up straight, and the rest of my trip was uneventful except for the fact that my legs felt numb. A couple of days later, I took my car to the Nissan dealer and described the metallic sound to the mechanic. I showed him approximately where it was coming from. He put the car up on the hoist and found absolutely nothing wrong. I can't be sure of what that noise was. Furthermore, I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me, but I'm very sure I saw what I saw. I really can't think of any logical explanation for what happened, so I can only assume it was paranormal. I've traveled that route several times since then in the same car and never experienced the same thing. Make of it what you will, but I wish I knew what it had been. A haunted life. I will never in my life forget the night that I first laid eyes on the ghost that inhabits my bedroom. I had just moved my bedroom from the third floor of our house down to the basement because my older brother moved into his own place, and the basement boasted more room for myself and a lot more privacy. I was soundly sleeping, and anyone would tell you I sleep like a rock, and it takes a lot to wake me up. Suddenly my eyes shot open. I wasn't at all groggy or out of it as people usually are when they are suddenly awakened in the middle of the night. I was very awake and very aware. The first thing I saw were the bright red lights of my alarm clock that read 3:15 a.m. I peered over slowly across my room, and that's when I saw it. She was standing at the foot of my bed, an older woman, short and on the heavy side. She was wearing a shawl and holding it over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back neatly in a tight bun. She looked like the old Italian grandmother type. She had the most serious look on her face, not mean or angry, just serious. Her entire figure was a gray-white color, but I could distinctly make out that her facial features, and I will never in my life forget her face. I was so shocked that I couldn't move. I literally could not convey any emotion, whether it be horror, happiness, or sadness. It was as if I was frozen with shock, and even stranger, I didn't feel scared. After probably 15 or 20 seconds of complete eye contact, I was able to slam my eyelids shut, and when I reopened my eyes, she was gone. Somehow I managed to fall back asleep that night, and I soon understood that the ghost wasn't a dark spirit because she never made me feel scared. Since this experience, I've had many other strange things happen in my bedroom, but I have never seen the ghost again. Pictures will fall off the wall in the middle of the night. Candles or odd objects will literally be flung across my bedroom. The door will slowly creak open and hit the wall with a thud at random times. Jewelry will disappear and never be seen again. My girlfriend's pair of gold earrings completely vanished, along with a few of my earrings and chains. 3 nights in a row recently, a picture of my deceased grandfather and I had fallen off the wall, where it hangs at precisely the same time each night. It's come to the point where I accept that I share my bedroom with a ghost. If she's screwing with me, I simply say out loud, "Cut it out," or "Stop it. Please go away," and it usually works. I think of myself as having the gift of experiencing paranormal activity, and as I've gotten older, I've learned to accept it, to even cherish it, because it's not an ability many people have. I know the instant I enter a new place whether spirits or energies are present. One night, a group of friends and I had gone to a popular beach about an hour from where we live, and on the way home I saw the ghost of a girl walking along the road. There was a patch of road probably 5 miles long that was bordered by fields on each side. No home or businesses, just huge flowing fields. When we had driven about 2 miles down the stretch of the road, I saw a girl probably around 14 or 16 years old walking along the dark deserted road by herself, dressed in a flowing white dress. It was very odd to me, and I suddenly got this strange feeling telling me to turn around. After about 20 seconds, I swung my car around in a quick U-turn and drove back the way I came to try and catch a glimpse of the ghostly girl again. My friends were confused and had no idea what I was doing. Sure enough, I drove about 3 miles and the girl had vanished. She was nowhere to be seen, and unless she ran into the fields and hid, or carried a jetpack where she can cover 5 miles of deserted road in seconds, she disappeared. One night, my girlfriend and I were at my sister's house babysitting my niece when we suddenly both heard the faint but clear as crystal whispers of children coming from the baby monitor. At the time, my niece was only a couple of months old and hadn't even started baby babbling. I ran up the stairs to my niece's bedroom, thinking someone had broken into the house, only to find her soundly sleeping and the room to be deathly silent. I'm convinced that someone was drowned in the second-floor bathtub of my home. When I was younger, I used to love taking baths, but became completely horrified and envisioned a stranger's hands holding me underwater whenever I would dunk my head under to rinse out shampoo. I think that spirits are attracted to me because my list of paranormal experiences can go on and on. My mother told me she used to see the ghost of a woman walking back and forth from the bathroom, the visions of someone being drowned, and my bedroom, when my bedroom was upstairs. One night, as I was driving home from a friend's house, all alone, I peered over into the passenger seat and saw the faint figure of a little girl sitting right next to me. I slammed the car to a stop and had to get out and recollect myself afterwards. A close friend of mine lives in a house that is very active. I am always seeing moving shadows, gray-blue orbs, and other strange apparitions in his house. Footsteps coming from the attic, doors swinging open by themselves, and electronics turning themselves on and off are common when I'm at his house. He admits the activity isn't half as usual as when I'm there, so I believe ghosts are attracted to me. As I said before, I've come to the point where I accept the fact that the paranormal is attracted to me. I truly believe it's a gift rather than a burden. I've yet to experience any negative energy or bad or negative paranormal experience, so that might change. But for now, I accept it, and I think it's pretty cool. The Haunted New House. We moved into a brand new 3-bedroom, 3,000 square foot home back in June of 2000. It was our first house together as a family. The house was built from the ground up. My family consisted of me, my husband, and my children, Charles and Sharon. Life should be good at 1193 Meadows Lane. This was in Georgia. Or at least, that is what I thought at the time. You know how a place can make you feel uncomfortable? This house rubbed my sixth sense the wrong way. I've always been sensitive regarding the spirit world. I make no claims as a medium or fortune teller. I am no better at making predictions than the weather person, but sometimes I can sense things. I tried getting over the feeling of not being comfortable alone inside the house. I started to blame it on stress at work or just nerves. Oh boy, did that house rattle all my nerves. You would hear noises like dishes falling off the rack into the sink. You would hear doors gently shutting. Stuff that you can easily dismiss. You might say it is the wind or you stacked the dishes too high. These kinds of things are mere coincidences. One night I was in my bed sleeping and I was awakened by hot breath. This breath belonged to whatever entity gently spoke my name. It was if a person was leaning down over me and intimately breathing my name in my ear. My eyes shot open in disbelief and horror. It took time for my eyes to adjust to the dark, but when they did, I saw absolutely nothing. My room looked exactly the same. The only noise that I could hear, besides the strong banging of my heart, was my husband Eric snoring. This never occurred again. I need to give you some pertinent information about the next event. We have a ceiling fan in our room that is operated by remote control. One night, while I was sleeping, the bedroom lights that are hooked up into the ceiling fan popped on at 3 a.m. Yes, the witching hour. My husband and I woke up and retrieved the control and turned off the lights. A couple of nights later, it happened again. My husband decided we had a short circuit in the remote. For as long as we lived in that house, those lights periodically kept coming on around that time in the morning. But my husband insisted it was a short circuit. In my bed, we have certain sides that we sleep on. One night, I slept on Eric's side. I experienced a nightmare right out of a Stephen King movie. I woke up the next morning with bruises and scratches all over my arm. I dreamt that I was being attacked by hundreds of nasty-looking demons. I was curious if it would happen again, so I slept on his side once again. The same thing happened. Since I am not a glutton for punishment, I started to sleep back on my side of the bed. The nightmare ceased to exist. I kept thinking about it and felt that it was too weird. I waited several weeks and took that dive one more time, and the same thing happened again. The dream was always the same. We had some good entities that came and went in our humble home. We had one that would close the bathroom doors and flush the toilet. At least this one was housebroken. We had one that would turn on the water faucets in the bathroom sinks full blast. This one used to really make me mad because that was running up my water bill. One early morning, around 5 a.m., I was on my way downstairs. Before I proceeded to climb down the stairs, I saw a figure dressed in white walk through the front door to enter my home. It walked past the stairs and into the kitchen. I stood on the upper landing, frozen in time. I did not hear any noises from the kitchen, but I did not go downstairs to see where it went. After this, I decided to get the house blessed. Just like on TV, that should solve everything. Once the blessing was complete, the house was calm for a couple of weeks, and then they came back. One particular time, I was having a bad day with PMS. I was crying for nothing and feeling mad at the world. You know how us women get around that time. I lay down in my bed weeping like a madwoman. Something lay down behind me. I was so scared that I jumped up out of bed immediately. I stared at the empty bed and saw a person's indentation still in my bed. Then the entity got up and the indentation went away. I stood there holding my breath because my body forgot how to breathe. I was shaking with fear but could not move my mouth to speak. I stayed that way until I started to feel dizzy because I noticed I was still holding my breath. I inhaled air slowly and deeply. I gathered myself and left my room for a while. I started to do my own research regarding my property. I did not want my house to be another sequel to Poltergeist. The only thing I found out was kind of interesting was that some of the Civil War was fought on our property. I'm sure there are long forgotten bodies with restless spirits longing to find their home. That would explain why we had so many different entities coming and going, like my home was the Motel 666. My last experience did not happen at the house but in front of a grocery store. Now this grocery store is right across the street from a really old cemetery. The burial headstones in that cemetery date all the way back to the 1800s. I took the liberty and walked over one day to check out the headstones, as I've got this thing about cemeteries. Eric and I were making a late night stop at the store, and as we were walking in, I saw a female standing in front of the store. The odd thing about this female was that she was the color gray. She looked like someone cut her out of a black and white movie. She never spoke or looked away. She just stood there staring out at nothing. I asked Eric, did he see her, and he did not. Later on, we moved away from Misty Meadows Lane, but I would never forget the events that took place in that house. Makes you wonder about how the world really operates. On the outskirts of town. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of the legend of Sleepy Hollow with a headless horseman and all that crazy stuff. Yeah, so that's where I'm from. I have never heard of any headless horseman, witness, or anything, but a lot of strange things happen in this town. Sleepy Hollow is a really small town with lots of old buildings and a huge cemetery. It gets really creepy at night, and there's barely anybody out by the time it's like 10 at night, so there are rumors, besides the headless horseman's appearance of course, that this ghost lady, probably in her 50s, wanders around the outskirts of town by this really isolated lake, which is surrounded by trees everywhere and one long curvy road that leads to the next town, which is Elmsford. Sleepy Hollow, being a small town, or cheap as I would call it, does not have any kind of entertainment such as a mall or a movie theater. I'm actually surprised we have a small subway. So if you live in Sleepy Hollow and you want to have fun, you have to go to another town. One day my friends and I decided to go to the movies in Elmsford late at night. After finishing the movie, we went somewhere else in that town to get something to eat. By the time we watched the movie and finished eating, it was already 4 a.m. On our way back to town, the whole ride was quiet because, of course, who wouldn't be tired at 4 a.m. on a Friday night? When we were passing by the lake, all of a sudden, I saw this lady walking in the opposite direction very slowly in a long white dress. She had a white towel wrapped around her head. She was walking around the edge of the lake, which was dark and foggy. I stopped breathing for a second and made sure I wasn't the only one seeing that. I looked around in the car, and all my friends looked as if they were possessed by what they were seeing. My friend driving the car slowed down and almost stopped the car. The lady gave us a cold look and was staring at all of us. We kept driving slowly till we drove past her, and we were still looking back at her. She was walking straight and wouldn't look to the sides, and then all of a sudden stopped and slowly turned around and stared at us one more time. She then started walking faster towards us. My friend stepped on the accelerator like there was no tomorrow. He drove as fast as he could, and I don't know what was scarier, whether the lady in the white dress was following us or the fact that we were going like 100 miles per hour, and it was extremely foggy and dark, and there are no kind of lights along the road anyway. Well, it was curve after curve after curve. As the car kept speeding, the lady's pale face with a cold look disappeared in the darkness behind us. We drove through the woods and finally made it into town. After we all calmed down, I remembered I had a dream in which my friends and I were driving fast by the lake while the lady in the white dress chased us the previous night. It was one of those dreams that you can't really remember until something related to it comes up and bam, you remember the dream. Some say she's just a crazy old lady who walks around the outskirts of town late at night for no reason at all. And others say it is a ghost of the lady in the white dress. I don't know which one to believe, but either way, it was pretty darn scary. The Haunted Inn. My boyfriend and I had decided to visit an old city during the holiday. It is a city known for its 15th, 16th, and 17th century preserved houses. They are very, very beautiful and very interesting. As we were kind of broke, we started looking for an inexpensive place to stay. We found this inn in the middle of the historical city, located in a 17th century house. So we checked in. Our room had the oldest style you can imagine, all original from past times. Well, that night was absolutely fun. We went out, listened to wonderful jazz musicians in a bar, danced, and walked under beautiful moonlight. We came to our room in the inn at about 12:30 a.m. Until then, all was fine. In the middle of the night, I woke up feeling extremely and unexpectedly cold. As it was summer and the nights were so hot, I got up without bothering to open my eyes and touched the wall until I found the button to turn off the air conditioner. Doing it, I dragged myself back to bed and got ready to sleep again. But my mind refused to do it. The cold seemed to worsen. I came nearer to my boyfriend, deeply asleep to feel warmer. This time I opened my eyes. The room was absolute darkness. Darkness so heavy you could almost slice it. And then it started. A sound. The weirdest sound I have ever heard in my life, coming from the bathroom, which was behind the wall, behind our bed. It began as a rustling, as if a strong wind was suddenly moving sheets of paper in there. But the window in the old bathroom was tightly closed, and there were no sheets there. I felt my spine getting cold, but telling myself it was probably the pipes or old wood, I kept listening carefully for the sounds. Then the worst happened. The rustling became a human sound. The sound of someone choking. By this time, I was crushing my boyfriend, who'd not waken up, and I started shaking him. The choking wasn't the choking of a victim. It just sounded evil. Then the sound began getting louder. I knew it was starting to approach, that it had come to the room where we were. Winds were spiraling in the room, but the windows were all closed. I thought, I heard, but now I guess I'm going to see something. So desperately, I yelled to my boyfriend, "Wake up!" and shook him till he did. Then I quickly told him in a frightened voice to please turn on the lights. He got up worried and did this. The moment he turned the lights on, all the sounds instantly disappeared. I sat on the bed with eyes wide open until the sun came up, and we checked out of the inn first thing in the morning. The Haunted Hotel. Having worked at several hotels and knowing more people who have as well, any one of us could tell you it is quite common for guests to pass away while staying in a hotel. I worked at the front desk, and any time someone would die, I, being superstitious, would not rent that room unless I absolutely had to. A few months would pass and someone else would die, and I would forget what room that last person had died in. So you can pretty much bet that if you have stayed in a hotel that is over a year old, someone may have died in your room. That being said, I do not like to take the last room in a hotel because I assume that someone has recently passed away in it. So you can understand my reluctance when the last room in a hotel was offered to myself and my boyfriend while driving home from vacation. We could have driven on after leaving in the late afternoon, but we were so exhausted after a week of camping in Maine, we had to stop outside of Boston for the night. Of course, all the rooms were booked, and we got the very last one. I told my boyfriend that someone must have died there recently, and he just rolled his eyes. We went to the room and just collapsed to sleep. A few hours later, around 1 a.m, I woke up to the bathroom light being turned on. I just assumed it was my boyfriend until I saw an old man with a towel wrapped around his waist step out. He then yelled at me, "What are you doing?" I said rather weakly, "This is my room. I'm sleeping." For a fleeting moment, I thought he had got mixed up with his room and somehow got our passkey. But he said, No, with your life. What are you doing? You're making a mistake. Okay. I admit at the time I was quite the wild one, so that wasn't something that I hadn't heard from my parents about a million times. Of course, by this time I was so filled with terror I couldn't move or breathe, but I managed to hiss, "Wake up!" My boyfriend rolled over just as the man was saying, "Move on, you'll be okay," and then disappeared while shaking his head. My boyfriend then rolled over and went back to sleep while I was as stiff as a board and wet with sweat. I turned on the television and the bedside lamp and watched a marathon of the Rockford Files until my boyfriend woke up the next morning. We broke up a week later. I figured, if a ghost wearing nothing but a towel takes the time to give you advice from the afterlife, you had better take it. Scratches and cold spots. I lived in Seaview, Washington about 5 years ago, and I was 21 at the time. Up until then, I had never had any paranormal experiences, at least that I know of. My girlfriend and I rented an apartment that consisted of only 4 per unit, making a total of 8 apartments. We had a top floor and were really excited about getting our own place, since before we had lived with roommates, and you know how that sometimes works out. We finally moved in and settled, and it wasn't even a few days later that things started happening. I wasn't really paying any attention, not until it progressed and got worse down the road. That's when I became aware. It was late fall when it all started happening. Now, it's the season of turning your heat on just about constantly, but for some reason our bedroom would stay extremely ice cold. I mean, see your breath cold. I checked the heater vent and it worked, but the cold was overpowering it. So I checked the windows for drafts and nothing turned up. Mind you, my ex and I knew nothing about paranormal activity nor thought about it. We had one cat named Bobo, who was a very playful and loving cat. One night we were watching TV in the living room, lit by the TV, and out of nowhere my cat was in the hallway. Bobo let out a shriek and started hissing and spitting, hair standing all on end. I jumped to my feet, heart racing, wondering what the hell was going on. I switched on the light and the cat's eyes were drawn to my room, still hissing at the doorway while backing up slowly. I called him and he didn't even glance at me, he was so frightened. I later found out that animals and young kids can sense these things. I now realize that's why the cat never slept in our room. One night, my ex was working the graveyard shift and I headed for bed. We had 3 comforters on our bed, the heat going, and PJs, and the room was still cold. We had just gotten used to it, I guess. I remember dozing off, and then at about 2:15 that night, I suddenly woke in a paralyzed fear and was afraid to move. I knew I was awake. I could see my breath. The moon was coming through my windows, and I noticed ice forming on the window pane. Now, I sat up, mind you, not paralyzed in my bed, but with an overwhelming dread and fear. My heart was racing and I was feeling sick to my stomach. Something was not right. I am a Protestant Christian and believe there is a spiritual warfare amongst us for our souls. Whatever awoke me let me know it was there and was terrifying me. I started to jump up and switch on the light and I literally heard a faint laugh, sounding like from my closet. I hightailed it out of there, switching on every light in the house and was still shaking. I started praying out loud and felt a little calmer, but it wasn't going back in there until the ex got home. I told her what had happened when she came in, bags under my eyes from lack of sleep. That morning she told me that while I was gone, she'd had some weird experiences too. We started wondering if maybe we did have something in our house. She said she had heard her name being called a couple of times, from a voice sounding like mine, but I was at work and she knew that. She also said that one day, while she was vacuuming, she heard a smash in the kitchen. She ran out there and our teapot on our stove was laying on the floor. Now at that time, when she told me this, I said it could have been the cat, but she said the cat was outside. Pretty freaking weird, I'll say. A few times myself, I swear that I had seen shadow-like figures move from room to room. They looked like a human silhouette, I know they were not mine because I would be sitting down and these things looked like they were gliding around. I'm not the smartest guy, but smart enough to tell the difference. Now that you heard what has gone on in this house, let's jump to the present. I watch shows about paranormal investigators and paranormal investigations. There's lots of them out there, and I enjoy reading about ghosts and spirits. And I believe this started because as I read or watched these shows, I started to realize I had these issues too, but did not know it at the time. So I went through memory lane and pulled out those pictures from when I lived there, and what a surprise. Sure enough, as I looked at them, and I have quite a few to look through, I found 5 photos that stood out like a sore thumb. There were 3 that had orbs in them. Now, I'm not too crazy about orb pics being, it could just be dust, bugs, rain, and so on, but these were different. With all that happened there and seeing these orbs, I definitely know this is the real deal. These energy balls had hues to them. A couple were blue and one had a large orange color, with what appears to be a face in it. Now, the Holy Grail, remaining to have actual apparitions in them, and guess where they were taken? In the bedroom. It gives me goosebumps every time I look at them. One is by my bed in the corner and the other is standing behind me in front of the closet. The closet where I heard that awful heckle of a laugh. I'm a true believer now. I just wish I knew then what I know now. I would have been out of there. One last thing. I thought of this as a private, but oh well. She's long gone and I'm married now. In that apartment, we would always fight constantly. It seemed like every day we were on the rocks and accusations and trust was not there. I had no explanation for this, but I had just gotten out of the shower and then I hear my ex say, "What the fuck?" Great, here we go again. What now? She saw scratches all over my back. I didn't feel them, let alone know they were there. I had no explanation, but she thought I was cheating on her. Now I feel that could have been from that evil spirit there causing mayhem. One more thing before I go. I love history and love old homes and such. Seaview was founded in the 1870s. Our whole neighborhood was houses ranging from the 1800s to maybe the 1930s. Our apartment was the only new place there in that area. I still wonder if those apartments are sitting on what used to be someone's home that was ripped down to make way for the apartments. The more I think about it, the more I believe that that is the truth about that piece of land.